Good afternoon. This is Dr. David A. Paget. Today is May 11th, 2021. This is the urban geography class. This is the second segment for May 11th. The focus is upon urban food deserts. And so I'm going to go through a couple of presentations about food deserts. Let's see. Now, hopefully, these two presentations might have a little bit of overlap. Yeah, okay. So this is the one I want to start off with. So I am largely recognized as being the first person to map Nashville's food deserts. I said map the food deserts. I didn't say discover. So obviously the people who discovered the food deserts are the people who are living in them. So just a little background. So about in 2003, I guess most of y'all were probably in pre-K somewhere, but in that's pre-kindergarten. But in 2003, I was at just launched the Tennessee State University Geographic Information Sciences Lab, and I was approached by an organization called Tying Nashville Together. They were uh, an interfaith coalition working for community empowerment or community improvement. And so at the time, they were engaged in a food store. They were engaged in a food store survey of sorts. So what they were doing was going in the food stores and looking at the cleanliness, looking at prices, looking at customer service. It was a really holistic um, analysis of food stores in Nashville. And their objective was to determine if all citizens of Nashville, Davidson County had equal access to healthy food. At some point, I don't even remember, they approached me and asked me to map the results of the project. And so, as usual, um, and so yeah, so this is what I just said. This is the food desert mapping methodology. And this is my methodology. This is not the methodology. Every geographer, urban geographer, whomever has his or her own approach to mapping food deserts. This is just mine. And so, anyway, so I've in the course of the mapping, I think, yeah, here's one of the first maps. So as usual, this was a student in my cartography class, and I gave her the assignment of taking the data, uh, taking some of the data and making a map. So she got supermarket data that we obtained from Nashville's health department. The health department is the arm of the government that does the uh, restaurant and supermarket safety uh, investigations. And so when you go into a restaurant, you'll see like a sign that has a score that says 93, hopefully, or 90 something, hopefully. Um, that's from the health departments. The health department's food safety score, and um, anybody who sells food has to go through that process. Even so, as you can see from this map, we have a layer of supermarkets symbolized by red point symbols, and then these are census tracts, I believe. And just from a casual observation, you can see that where there are Black people, there are not many grocery stores, and where there are grocery stores, there are not many Black people. So that's just from casual observations. So this is when we just first got started. Um, so I started to notice that there was when in some of the lower income, that those zone 3 areas of Nashville, that there were no grocery stores. I mean, I drew a 1 mile radius around each community centroid and found no grocery stores within a straight line distance. That's not walking distance. Walking distance does this. We're talking about a straight line, 1 mile distance. Some of these communities didn't have any grocery stores anywhere near them. And so I selected the block groups within the within a 1 mile radius, and noticed that within those circles that there was a significantly high percentage of people who didn't own cars and also relied upon public transit. And so I started to see uh, a pattern in some neighborhoods of where people would probably have a very difficult time getting to a grocery store. And so this is the Edge Hill community. This is from 2004. So this was the beginning of the first food desert map for Nashville. These point symbols, these gray point symbols, are are renters, people who are renters who do not have cars. So that is an obvious barrier. And you might ask, well, why would a person not have a car? Well, maybe they can't afford it. As people get older, a lot of our elderly population, they can they're no longer physically able to drive. And in some states, they actually will have their driver's licenses taken away if they can't pass a test after they get to age 65 or 70. And so the centroid of the community, I place it as the Edge Hill Homes, which is a public housing community. And you can see in that area with this dot density symbology that there are no grocery stores within a 1 mile radius. There used to be a Harris Teeter on 21st Avenue South. It's now a Kroger. That I think this Belmont buy right is still, it might not be there anymore. Then of course, this is the Melrose Kroger that's um, on Franklin Road or 8th Avenue South. You can see how far away that is. And these people have no cars. Not another grocery store in sight. I also identified what I called captive grocery store clientele. So there were, I don't think any of these stores are still open. I know they're not. But again, in zone 3 of the concentric zone model, we had the Tony Sudicum and J.C. Napier's homes. And you notice many households with no cars. You can clearly see the pattern of lack of vehicular ownership. So these people, no cars, public transit is not really an efficient way of getting to the grocery store in Nashville. It's somewhat is common in the South for there to be a lack of investment in public transit. And I think I've been over this. Only 2% of people in Nashville use public transit regularly. And if you've been on the bus, you know who those folks are. Low income people, probably the people that have the least voice in decision making are the ones who dominate public transit. So as a result, there's not a lot of interest or investment in improving public transit. There are some routes that only run during the daytime. There's some routes that every year when the budget comes out, a lot of routes get cut. There have been some improvements. There's the BRTs, the bus rapid transit routes. So there are some express bus routes that go out Gallatin Pike and out. Well, I think they cut the Charlotte Express. I'm pretty sure. I think that was the 10. Almost sure that got cut in the last budget. So people in these neighborhoods, public transit is not an option, really. In fact, there was a study during this time where I think it was some students, I don't know whether they were from TSU or Vanderbilt or both, but they did an experiment. They tried to ride the bus to a grocery store just to see how long would it take. And it took 3 hours. 3 hours round trip, and that was without shopping. That was basically just going to this, taking the bus to the store and going back. No shopping. And the way Nashville is that, you know, I mean, there might be an hour between each bus, right? If you go to any other major city, there might be 15 minutes between buses, maybe 20. It might be an hour, like in late at night. But in Nashville, even during the day, your regular bus lines might only run an hour at a time. So imagine what would happen if you missed the bus. Now you have to wait another hour for the next bus to come along. Uh, and so you can see how that could be very problematic for someone who is shopping, and usually if you're out, you're by yourself. You've got your 2 children, 3 children with you, trying to maintain and manage them, and you got your bags. So public transit is just not an option. So these communities that you see on the screen have to shop at the grocery stores, or are limited to the grocery stores that are at A and B, or were. Both of these are closed now. When Tying Nashville Together did that in their survey, they found in these 2 grocery stores and some like them, food, well, perishable food, but still perishable food on store shelves 4 and 5 years past the expiration date. I didn't say days, I didn't say months, I said years past the expiration date. And you might ask yourself, well, how could they treat people like that? Where else were they going to shop? So the owners of these stores had no kind of care or concern or empathy for their customers, because their customers had no place else to go. And so it was a very bad situation for people in some of these communities. As a matter of fact, in 2004, the night that we released these maps, the news people left the meeting and went straight to the store that was on Lafayette. And the guy was trying to pull all that expired food off the shelves. He's, no, get that camera out my face. But I mean, they deserve to get called out like that. But these are the conditions that some people were living in Nashville back then. So in 2000, a lot happened. So we essentially, a movement started. The food justice movement started in Nashville. And so so the food landscape changes. Stores close, stores open all the time. And so oh man. So in 2009, the food desert movement, not just in Nashville, but across the country, started to look not only at neighborhoods that did not have supermarkets, but looked at neighborhoods that, in place of supermarkets, had in place of supermarkets had fast food outlets. And we know, I don't know how many of you have ever seen a movie called what's it called? Super Size Me. There's a movie called Super Size Me. I don't know if any of y'all ever seen it. But what the movie was basically about, it was a guy in the film, the star of the film, it was a documentary. And he only ate McDonald's for a whole month, right? He only ate McDonald's, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And if they asked him, would you like to supersize it? He had to say yes, right? By the end of the month, he was messed up. He was in bad shape. You know, so he was just pointing out the fact that that fast food is just not really good for you. So unfortunately, what we found in our when I say our, I did this project along with Dr. Heather O'Hara, who is a medical doctor at Meharry Medical College. We looked at these food deserts in terms of, how many fast food establishments were in and near them. And as you can see, in the Edgehill Food Desert, there are many, many, many fast food places. And research since has shown that people who live in food deserts tend to eat fast food more often. And sometimes it's the easiest and cheapest option. If you've got 2 or 3 children, they're hungry, you're in a hurry, maybe you just got off from work, that 99-cent menu looks really attractive at that time. You know what I mean? You're not thinking, oh, what can I get as a healthy option for my kids? Hey, you people working 2 and 3 jobs, you're tired, you don't have time to, maybe not even, you might not even have enough strength to cook, right? So let's go get some McNuggets. Let's go get something off this 99-cent menu. You might not even have a whole lot of money. And so, day after day after day, you're on a steady diet of fast food, and which tends not to be a good thing. But in our research, we wanted to really look at the relationship between, so here's another map. These are all 4 of the food deserts I identified. All of them are in zone 3, as you can see. And as you can see, food desert, fast food. This is the Sudicum, Napier area food desert. Edgehill, lots of fast food establishments. This is the North Nashville food desert, which is close to Tennessee State University. And then there's that Kroger, the Monroe Street Kroger, but this highway 6540 is somewhat of a barrier between this neighborhood and that grocery store. So, there are physical barriers that cut people off from food. But looking at it more closely, so with the help of Dr. Heather O'Hara, who's a nutritionist at Meharry Park, I think she was a director of family medicine there, probably still is. So we got a layer of body mass index. Body mass index is an indicator of whether or not a person is at a healthy weight for his or her height. And so if your BMI is 25 or below, then you're at a healthy weight. If your BMI is 25 to 30, then you're overweight. If you're 30 and above, then that's considered to be obese. So the question we were trying to answer was there a significant difference between the BMI in food deserts and outside of food deserts? And the paper that Dr. Heather O'Hara and I wrote is in your reading materials that we published. But as you can see, inside the food deserts, we got 26.3, 27.78, which is, overweight. But then when we get outside the food deserts, you do see there is a slight difference between food desert residents and people who aren't in food deserts. Can we say conclusively that food deserts cause people to be overweight? No, these results weren't significantly different enough. Notice here, outside the food desert, we got a census tract that has a 28.8, very close to obesity here, and that's not in a food desert. So we couldn't say that there was a direct correlation. Let's see, is there a map showing different types of food places? We didn't break we didn't break it down by types of fast food back then. We just looked at fast food, period. But that would be interesting. Take a look at that. So this was as of 2011. We started out mapping food deserts, delineating food deserts. Then we looked at the relationship between obesity and and food deserts and weight. Again, didn't find significant differences, but it was worth investigating. And then moving into 2010, 2011, as part of the recovery from the Great Recession, the Metro Health Department got $7.5 million in the Putting People to Work initiative. And part of that, those funds were used for a food desert mapping study called the Corner Stores Project. So the Corner Stores Project essentially had as its objective to put healthy foods into these little convenience markets, right? Because the convenience market owners said that if they had the equipment to, like refrigerators and things like that, if they had the equipment, then they would sell fresh fruits and vegetables. But they said that they didn't, so therefore they didn't sell food. So with the funding, the health department provided refrigerators, everything that the corner store owners needed to sell fresh fruits and vegetables and whatever else. But this map you see here is when we went through the selection process. So because there was a question as to, well, which corner stores are in food deserts and which aren't. So we did what's called a select function, and we put on a quarter-mile buffer outside the food deserts. This is the Edgehill Food Desert. So the dots, the point symbols in green are corner stores that are inside of the food desert, and then we got a few that are on the outside, maybe a quarter of a mile outside, because we assume people might venture outside of their neighborhood to other corner stores and not just shop at the ones in there. So that's what this is. Let me see if I can. Let me go back. So the results of the Corner Stores Project were not what the health department. It was not what the health department wanted. Yes, food was placed into these corner stores. Did people shop for food at them? No. And really, I'm pretty sure you've been to the Exxon Tiger Market, or you've been to, Shell, what's the Shell thing? Twice Daily or something like that. And you've seen some apples and bananas. Did you buy them? Unless you were really, really hungry. You didn't buy that banana from the gas station. You didn't buy that apple from the gas station. Who wants to buy an apple or banana from a gas station? You don't. And neither do people who live in these food deserts. Research shows that they tend to shop at the same places that everybody else does. They just have a much, much harder time getting there. And like I said, it wasn't just in Nashville, but there were studies done, throughout the nation that showed the same thing, that people who live in food deserts want to shop the same places everybody else does. Kroger, Winn-Dixie, Rally's, Ralph's, Publix, Food Lion, wherever. So again, the researchers and the proponents of this project they were disappointed, but that's why we engage in scientific inquiry, to answer questions. The question was, will people eat fresh fruits and vegetables more often if they're going to a corner store? Well, the answer was no. So that made the issue really about transportation, not necessarily about convenience, right? Not even about presentation or easy accessibility. It was really about, now it's about transportation. I'll get into some other issues later. Okay, so one of the successes, I guess, this movement put a lot of grocery stores on the hot seat. And one of those grocery store chains was Save-A-Lot. So Save-A-Lot is a grocery store chain that specifically targets households with an average income of approximately $40,000 per year or less. That's about 2/3 of the average. The average household income for Nashville and Tennessee is around $64,000 per year. So they were about 2/3 of that or less. Now, the problem back before we got into this movement was that these Save-A-Lot stores were extremely poor performing. They had bad service. They were smelly. Some of those a grocery store you walk and there's that smell. I can't even. There's some grocery stores that are dirty just have that certain. It smells like rotting fish mixed with rotting meat mixed with, But so that's how a lot of the Save-A-Lot stores were. But in this movement, we brought so much attention to the food desert and urban food insecurity issue that the corporate office from Save-A-Lot came here. All the Save-A-Lot stores in Nashville at that time were franchisers. These are individuals who bought a stake in Save-A-Lot. And in any franchise contract, they have a certain level of autonomy, so they can operate how they want to, basically, without a lot of oversight from the corporate office. And that makes being a franchisor attractive because you can own a stake in Save-A-Lot, but you don't have to follow every Save-A-Lot rule. So for instance, if you were a franchisor and you had a Save-A-Lot store in a predominantly Latinx community, then you could stock your shelves with products that would serve that community, as opposed to having a set list of products from corporate that you had to follow, and people are coming in the store asking for this, asking for that, and you can't do anything, right? Unfortunately, that autonomy or hands-off attitude allowed these franchises to go rogue and really not serve their customers. And so when the corporate officers came to Nashville, they closed every franchise. They took away. See, if you're not performing, if a franchisor is not performing up to snuff, then that's a violation of the franchise contract. And so all those franchises were closed down. So every Save-A-Lot store that you see now is a corporate store. And I was skeptical. I used to live right down the street. This is the Save-A-Lot that's right next to Cumberland View Apartments, otherwise known as Dodge City. I used to live maybe about a mile, maybe less than a mile away, maybe 3/4 of a mile away from this Save-A-Lot in a Buena Vista neighborhood. And I was skeptical. I thought, man, this is gonna be the same old, same old. They're gonna start off clean and good service, and then after about a few months, they're gonna go right back to what it used to be. But that isn't what happened. I mean, this store maintained. Look, it's not Kroger. It's definitely not Publix. Definitely not Publix. But I mean, it's. There are some good prices in there because they're targeting a low income clientele. There's some good prices on stuff now. Back then, I guess I'm still technically single, but I'm not, but I was all the way single back then. So I ate a lot of shake and bake. Don't judge me. I mean, I can read directions and turn the stove to a certain temperature. So, you get a box, but shake and bake costs like almost $3 a box with, for 2 meals, 2 packets. But they had at Save-A-Lot, they had like a shake and bake knockoff that was 99 cents a box, and it was good. Matter of fact, it tasted better than shake and bake. So I used to get that from there. Sometimes the meats would be cheaper in Save-A-Lot than at Kroger, and they also had fresh fruits and vegetables. They had a really good selection of fresh fruits and vegetables. The downside, they had a lot of processed foods. I mean, a lot of processed foods, but it is what it is. You have to be judicious when you shop. But the Save-A-Lot store, someone mentioned Aldi. Aldi is interesting. They're interesting. It depends upon where you go. But Aldi, I haven't been in Aldi's in a long time, but they're interesting. I don't think they have. I think they have shopping carts, but you have to put a quarter to get.
Yes, you have to put a quarter for a shopping cart.
Don't have any bags.
Don't have no bags.
It's just it is what it is. But they save money. But Aldi's can have some oh man, they can have some deals that you'll look and say that can't be that cheap. They're lying.
Yeah.
And then you go and that's really the price. you know? So, all these is different. I haven't really had a chance to really look into all these a lot, but this was a success that we had. Okay. This was a success that we had in bringing these Save-A-Lots into compliance and decency. Okay. So moving forward to 2013, the question was, okay, do we have suburban food deserts? So if you notice, the original food desert maps that I created were all in zone 3. But of course, as you are reading that study on the changing shape of cities. Over the past couple of decades, poverty has shifted to the suburbs. We've seen this reversal. Inner city gentrification has led to higher income in the inner city, higher income people. And while we're on the topic in Nashville, now that Nashville has gentrified and people have moved into basically zones 1 and 2 in Nashville. Let's see. First, there was a turnip truck. We got that first in downtown Nashville. Then now there's a Whole Foods and a Publix. Right, all that in downtown Nashville. Since now that we have all of these higher income people living in the urban core, like down in the Gulch region of Nashville, now all of a sudden we actually have several grocery stores where there were none for a long time. So anyway, so the question is, well, has the food desert issue moved out to the suburbs? So the Nashville Civic Design Center, which is a urban research center funded by Vanderbilt, the state of Tennessee, and UT Knoxville. And I've actually had a couple of students who were hired as interns by the Nashville Civic Design Center. So they're really a good organization. So I did my analysis in the suburbs of Nashville just to answer that question. And essentially what the Civic Design Center wanted me to do is look at areas outside of this red urban core. They wanted me to look really out in these kind of darker blue areas to see if there were any urban food deserts. Food deserts. And sure enough, in Antioch, I found the place. No grocery stores within a 1 mile radius. Heavy concentration of people with no cars. I didn't really median household income for this community is between $23,000 to $41,000 per year. So this community in Antioch, which is, let's see where this is. I think this is Edmondson Pike here. This is Nolensville Road if you want to kind of orient yourself. And this is Harding. So if you take Harding between Nolensville Road and Interstate 24 is where you'll find that. I know exactly where that neighborhood is. I mean, I've had a friend of mine that lives right in there. A lot of international people live in this community. And so also in Madison, I was surprised at this. Like I said, I used to live in Madison, and I did not realize that on the north side of Old Hickory, so east of Gallatin Road on Old Hickory, past this is Gallatin. There's this community is in the 4th lowest quintile, so it's a relatively moderate to low income community, and this is out in the suburbs. So we normally don't expect to see people with lower incomes in the suburbs, but as we talked about yesterday, we've seen this change, and now and what makes it worse is these people have even less access to public transit, and so we started to see some evidence of suburban food deserts, and that was in 2013. And so this was right before the 2010 census. And so we were going to take other looks, because there's always a need for food desert research, because there's always constantly change occurring. Here's some of the going into 2012, 2014. There was a $10 million food desert bill that almost made it through the Tennessee state legislature. I couldn't believe the bill was even conceived. I said, what, in Tennessee, $10 million incentive? But it died, and it died. It didn't make it through the legislature. We're a red state. Now Kroger, this actually is the now Kroger actually got some tax credits to I guess either maintain or retain their Kroger stores in food deserts and maybe upgrade them. So we started to see, some movement. Now the Nashville mobile market was an attempt. It was actually started by Vanderbilt graduate students. Some graduate students at Vanderbilt started this Nashville mobile market, and it survived for about 4 or 5 years, I think. And so basically, it was just as you can see here. They had vendors, and they would go into neighborhoods and park, and people in neighborhoods, specifically senior centers. They would go to a lot of the senior centers in Nashville where people really can't get out, and the people would come out, and it was they had a ramp, so if people were in wheelchairs or on canes, they could get into the market. But it was a very narrow profit line venture. I mean, and so eventually they couldn't sustain it. They just lost too much money. And here's just some research. Just various, a lot of research. This is from the American Association of Geographers conference in 2013. So we started to see a lot more research and analysis of food deserts. This article is in your reading. This is from an article produced by researchers at the Charles Drew Medical University in Los Angeles, California. It's the one of the 4, HBCU medical schools, which include, of course, Meharry, Morehouse, Howard, and the 4th one is Drew in Los Angeles. And so they did an analysis looking at whether or not you could predict the intake of individuals in terms of fruits and vegetables based upon whether or not they are close to a supermarket. And so I think that they, this is the abstract. So they were able to predict that, obesity and other health variables for people were influenced by the presence or lack thereof of a supermarket. This is my hometown, Baltimore. So Baltimore has been a long time food desert site of concern, and so there's a lot of applications of GIS to look at food deserts in Baltimore. So I was just home over the weekend visiting my mother, and even in my mother's neighborhood, I couldn't believe how far we had to drive to get to a grocery store. I mean, there are no grocery stores anywhere near where my mother lives. We had to drive a long way. I was like, man, I thought we were going to go to a giant food market that's maybe 3 miles away. It's closed. The liquor store is still there, but the grocery store is closed. That should tell you something. We let you drink all the liquor you want, but you can't eat, right? So yeah, it's in Baltimore. So here's some other alternative approaches of the farmers markets. I'll talk about this perhaps, but there's another strategy to a mitigation effort against food deserts. New York had this green carts program that was, I think it's still there. It was very successful, where you could have an individual selling fruits and vegetables, and it was sustained or maintained by the city of New York or subsidized by the city of New York. Um, and so you can see how that is a very innovative way of mitigating food deserts. Um, I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and there was a chain of grocery stores there called Food for Less, and they just all went out of business all of a sudden. And as you can see, this was a brand new store, and it went out of business almost right after it opened. Nice storefront, completely empty. And so I was brought down as a consultant to look at possible solutions to St. Petersburg, Florida's food desert problem. And one of the solutions was these urban gardens. So with Florida being relatively warm all year long, it's easy to have a almost year-round growing season to at least provide vegetables and perhaps some fruit. Meats, other stuff, that's another story, but at least this was one form of food desert mitigation that I observed in St. Petersburg, Florida. Also, while I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, there's another level or another layer of food that is not part of the retail food market, and that is um, food pantries, soup kitchens, places that take WIC and SNAP dollars, and so this was a hunger map. So this was a map of all the places that people could get food um, throughout the St. Petersburg, Tampa area, which I thought was very interesting because um, a lot of people don't realize how much food is out there for those who want it, but a lot of people might not be aware. People may not be aware of all the places that you could potentially either get free food or food at a discount. Um, so it raises a question as to, maybe we should, once we identify food deserts, maybe we should also look to bring these resources into those food deserts where people might have uh, food insecurity. This is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They developed it's still there. It might not be at this link. This is probably an old link, but the USDA has a food desert mapping tool. Um, and so the only issue with this map is that it's on a federal level, and so you don't really get it's not really updated as frequently as we would like. It's a great tool, but it's not really updated as frequently as we would like to have it updated. But it's good to get an idea of where there might be food insecurity. But this map also gives us a idea of where there is urban and rural food insecurity. So there are places in rural areas, as you can see out west, that has food insecurity. So this is it's just more excuse me. This is from an organization called Policy Link. So the Policy Link organization okay, so the Policy Link organization, I think it's policylink.org. If you're ever looking for information on helping communities in any way, Policy Link is an excellent organization. It's a Black organization, and so excuse me. And so this was just a webinar, people really engaging in conversations about food deserts, urban food insecurity. And so that is the end of that presentation. I'm going to go to the next one. Like I said, there might be a little bit of overlap in these. Let's see. Here's that, here's some of the readings, a couple of videos, Food Deserts of Memphis, so on and so forth. Now, this presentation has a greater emphasis upon community education and looks at young people. Some of it might overlap, and I'll just go past the parts that overlap. So this is again bringing Tennessee State University into the I don't want to say fight, but the I guess it's a fight versus food insecurity. And so I'm not going to click on this now, but this is an interview I did on a local news station. I don't know what year that was. It was a couple of years ago about food deserts. You can click on it. I'm not going to do it. It blows up in Zoom. I'm not doing it. On to the next slide. You can watch that on your own. So again, this is a little bit of overlap. Here's a even nicer, a cleaner map of the original food deserts that I mapped in Nashville. And then here's that map that the student made. Like I said, there's some overlap. Some of these are the same maps that you've seen before. And suburban food deserts. Okay, so now we're bringing some young people into the picture. So in 2006, I wrote a proposal to the State Farm Insurance Company for a Good Neighbor Service Learning Grant. And so I was successful. I got $15,000 and I used the money to build a geographic information systems lab in Pearl Cone High School, mainly in their 9th grade academy. You can see there that Pearl Cone is typically at least 90% Black. And now 100% of the students there qualify for free and reduced lunch programs. And that's a demographic that normally is not exposed to geographic information systems. And so there's so much opportunity with GIS. That's why I used to always be in an airport. I mean, in addition to teaching at TSU, I've owned a consulting business since 1992. And typically, I'm on a plane 2-3 times a month. I have clients all over the country. Now I do everything virtually. One of my clients is in Miami. I was enjoying that last year, but hey, at least I'm working. At least I still have that extra income coming in. But it's too much. There's too much opportunity. You even see now with this class project, you all are making the story map for the National Park Service, and you might say, well, it's for free, Dr. Pad, you got us working for free. But no, it's paying it forward, because trust me, when this map comes out and people see that Tennessee State University students built that map for the National Park Service, it's going to pay dividends later on. Trust me. So it's called paying it forward. But I turn work away all the time. I mean, I give work to you students that I could have done the National Park Service map. I would have told them to find some money, find me about $20,000. That's about how much I charge to do something like this. And they probably would have found the money, and that's how it would have gone. But I don't have time. I don't have time. I just don't have time to do the Africa Town story map. So I said I'll let the students get the opportunity to do it. they'll get the opportunity to engage in a real project. So I've always so there's so much opportunity out there, especially that we, as people of color, don't even see. So that's why I built the lab at Pearl-Cohn High School, to get these young people involved. And there's a longer story behind that. I got some more money from HUD. Got $10,000 more from HUD. Some money from the Title III from Tennessee State. Got some money from NASA, Globe, and so we. So as part of the project, it's 46. My students, like you all, engaged in service learning, and so in a time not with the pandemic, we would have gone to some school, maybe, I don't know, maybe. And in this case, my students went to Pearl-Cohn and led the students in some GIS-based urban food desert mapping projects. One of them was to make a map of the source of their food, or their food footprint. So this kids, young ninth graders, brought food from home, and then they mapped the source of the food that they ate or brought from home. And as you can see, the students were shocked that, with just normal food, these were not exotic foods. These were just normal foods that everybody eats. Look at where we get our food from, all over the place, even down here in South America. So, the urban food insecurity problem is somewhat tied to this, because how much does this cost in terms of transportation? What if we eliminated the transportation costs from the cost of food? Obviously that would drive the prices down. So that's why there's this movement for, buy local, eat local, because that makes food more affordable. But this is the extent of where these kids' food came from. They were surprised, like, wow, I didn't know our food came from all over the place. Yeah, it does. Now this is a map that hopefully you will recreate to some degree with the assignment. So what we did was we surveyed the students, and we asked them a series of questions. One was, how many days what are the grocery stores you visit most often? Now, what was surprising, Pearl-Cohn High School is literally maybe not even a mile from Tennessee State University. So here's TSU, right in this area here. And then Pearl-Cohn High School is right in here in the 37208 zip code area. So you can see by these point symbols, that's where the students live. So most of them live in 37208, right over by Fisk, Meharry. But if you notice, most of them, they go shopping as far away as the Charlotte Avenue Super Walmart, or the Walmart that's Clarksville Highway Kroger, or way over here. So a lot of the students, this is what I was talking about. Their families don't go grocery shopping at convenience markets. They go grocery shopping at the same places everywhere everybody else does. We asked them, well, how many days you eat fast food per week? How many grocery days you go grocery shopping per month? And so we put in a lot of assumptions, and we were trying to teach the students something about the scientific method, making hypotheses. So we asked them, well, would we expect to see a positive or inverse relationship between grocery shopping days and distance from the grocery store? So of course we would expect to see an inverse first relationship. The farther the grocery store is away, the less often you're going to shop, because it's far away. We also expect to see a positive relationship between distance from the grocery store and fast food consumption, and so on and so forth. So we did kind of a crude, I'm not going to get into all of this. So I got some money to buy some mobile devices, and this was a long time ago. So they did urban food mapping. So here are some of my students here working with the children, or some of my friends will call them churn, over at Pearl Cone High School. So at one point in time, this would be you. You'd be over here with these ninth graders. I would teach you and you would teach them. And one way to find out if you really know what you're talking about is to try to teach it to somebody else, especially somebody who has no clue, or what you're coming at them with, Um, so we did the mapping exercise. Then we made a scattergram. I mean, this was a crude scattergram, and so so here's variable 1, miles from the store, and here are the student groups. And so here's shopping days per month and fast food. So there are 4 variables on the scattergram. And so let's see. So for miles from the store, we expected to see a solid positive relationship between miles from the grocery store and shopping days per month. And as you can see, that's not exactly true. The only trend that we saw that was pretty steady, well, this is miles from the grocery store, so we saw that there's a variation of distance from the grocery store. Here's fast food consumption. So we expect to see fast food. Now, the fast food consumption with mild, that was the only variable that held true. So notice that the farther away these students lived away from the grocery store they normally shop, the more fast food consumption that there was. The other variables were not predictive. If I go back and look at this map again, and this is a map that you will recreate, hopefully. The other layer that you see here, the red areas are areas where people spend more money outside of the home on food than inside. So the assumption is that where we see these point symbols with the red areas being very relatively large, we would assume that those would align with the areas where people spend more money outside of home on food than inside. And there's a slight correlation, not strong, but just slight correlation that we saw there. So that was a really great experience for both the TSU students and the students at Pearl Cone to engage in this exercise. Now, next I got involved with the Reach 2020 project, which was a food desert mitigation project, a $451,000 project. It's funded by the Centers for Disease Control. The main intervention strategy was to create pop-up markets at community partner sites. And the community partner sites were primarily faith-based institutions. And then we were going to study, engage in a study to see if, in fact, there was a relationship between our maintaining these pop-up urban markets and the health of people who went to them. So here's the map. And so I was a GIS consultant on the project. And so here are the sites where the pop-up markets were, primarily at churches, and a lot of the markets would open up immediately after church. Notice that we didn't really serve a whole lot of people. This was a very difficult project to sustain, again, because of the transportation costs. So with the project, Meharry subsidized food vendors at up to $10,000 each. But even with the subsidy, it was very difficult for the food vendors to maintain a state of profitability. And as soon as the food vendors lost money, they quit. That was it. We're out. They would, and you might ask, well, why would the pop-up markets cause these vendors to lose money? Well, think about it. A lot of them had booths or setups, maybe at the Nashville Farmers Market, maybe at other places where they were pretty much permanently there in one place. But now we're asking them to venture out. So now you've got to go, you've got another site, that's more money. You might have to hire more people, that's more money. and that extra cost just ate into their profits. And if for whatever reason they didn't make, they took a loss one weekend, giddy up, they quit. That was it. They could not take a chance on losing money. Even if they made money for 3 or 4 weeks, that first week they lost money, that was it. They were done. So the project really did not proceed as successfully. I mean, we had a hard time just keeping the markets going. So there really wasn't a chance to get into the health impacts. I disagree with this model from the very start, because I told them that it probably wouldn't work. But I was just a GIS consultant. They said, Dr. Padge, you just do that mapping. You do the mapping. We got this. Okay. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out as well as we thought. My urban geography class a few years ago, the class project was to analyze North Nashville to see if a sustainability program could be created for the pop-up markets. So the question is there enough land? Is there enough vacant property in North Nashville to sustain urban gardens that would sustain these pop-up markets? But we would also have to put in some hydroponic indoor gardens in abandoned buildings. So some of those abandoned buildings that we saw is, maybe they could be indoor gardens, because it's not warm enough here to grow food year round. We would have to do some indoors. And so the class did determine that there was definitely more than enough land to sustain X number of markets. So that was the class project in 2017 for this class. Now in 2017, Nashville got really serious about urban food insecurity. I was part of a committee that in the mayor's office to eliminate food deserts. This was under Megan Barry's administration. So her administration was really serious, not just lip service about food deserts. I have been working previously with an organization called Uplift Solutions. Uplift Solutions is a social entrepreneurial organization. So what's social entrepreneurism? It's capitalism with a conscience. So yes, you're making money, but you're making money to help people, not just to get rich, get a Bentley, hop on your PJ. I didn't know what a PJ was, so I asked some of my friends. Talking about, I don't go commercial, I only fly a PJ. I'm like, what's a PJ? Pajamas? Oh, private jet. Okay. But a social entrepreneur, works for social causes. So Uplift Solutions, what do? They build grocery stores and food deserts. Now, what's the difference between them and Kroger and Publix and Walmart and Winn-Dixie? Well, what Uplift Solutions does is they go into the community first before they even think about building anything. So the entire community is involved in a collaborative process of building a store. And so in that collaborative process, for instance, people are asked, what would you want in a grocery store if we built one here? And people, they engage in focus groups and they say, this is what we want. We want this, we want that. As opposed to what usually happens is you just get a store and you hope these people want to shop there. In some cases, it doesn't happen. In some cases, it doesn't happen. There's also an educational aspect, because the last thing that you want to do is put a grocery store in a neighborhood that's a food desert and have them go there and eat more fried chicken and processed food. I mean, you just make it easier to eat fried chicken and processed foods, right? So there's an educational process. So in addition to giving people what they want, they also try to give people what they need. in terms of healthy foods and all of that. So it's a contractual agreement, and so I think we literally had a $20,000 contract for Uplift Solutions to come to Nashville and work in the Edge Hill community to establish a grocery store there. Edge Hill, if you notice, is a persistent food desert. They still don't have a grocery store. Ever since I started this, Edge Hill has not had a grocery store since 2003. And you might think, well, why is that? Well, there's a relationship between gentrification and food deserts, because food retailers and a lot of retailers do not want to be in a community that's gentrifying. So, for instance, there were some retail market developers who came to Nashville in our attempt. We brought them here in an attempt to get them to build a grocery store in Edge Hill. Both of them said no. So I asked them, how did you make that decision? They used geographic information systems. They did a demographic and socioeconomic analysis of Edge Hill, determined that Edge Hill is a community in transition that is going through gentrification. So why not put a store in a gentrifying neighborhood? The nature of gentrification in Edge Hill is such that it's going from black to white. So what would happen is, if a grocery store is placed in a neighborhood that's going through transition, theoretically, it's going to either become the black grocery store or the white grocery store. If black people like it, white people aren't going to shop there. I'm saying this theoretically. Dr. Patter's a racist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is theoretically. If white people decide it's a nice grocery store, black people aren't going to shop there. That's the theory. So what food retailers would much rather have is either all black neighborhood or all white neighborhood or all Latinx neighborhood or all Asian Pacific. They'd rather have a solid, culturally homogenous, racially homogenous community where they would get the entire market. But if the community is in transition, the fear is you're only going to get half of the market. And then, of course, that store won't be sustained. Now, that actually happened in East Nashville. A few years ago in East Nashville, there was a super Walmart, a neighborhood Walmart, the smaller one. A neighborhood Walmart grocery store was planned for East Nashville. Now, East Nashville is, if you haven't noticed, is on the extreme end of gentrification, right? Now, the newly arriving, let's just say it, white gentrifiers didn't want Walmart in the community. Why not? A lot of people have problems with Walmart. They've got all kinds of human rights abuses in China. Almost everything in Walmart comes from China, right? So people have, they're abusing the workers. They're not paying these Chinese workers over there. Funny how, anyway, I'm not going to go there. But, and then, of course, there's the workers themselves. People say that Walmart treats their workers badly. They don't get a living wage. There's all kinds of problems with Walmart from a social justice perspective. So the white people didn't want Walmart there. Now, the black people who had been living in East Nashville said, we don't care what's going on in China. We need to eat. We need a store. We need jobs. So the black people in East Nashville, it was exactly what I said. It was polarized. It was a completely polarizing situation. Now, the Walmart was built. The Walmart neighborhood store was built, but guess what? The white people who didn't want it there, do you think they shopped there? Nope. They had cars. They could go to wherever. They could drive out of East Nashville, go shopping wherever, Whole Foods, wherever. Guess what happened to the Walmart? Didn't stay open more than 4 or 5 years. Didn't stay open more than 4 or 5 years. So that case in East Nashville was a textbook case of what happens when you put a grocery store in a gentrifying neighborhood. But Uplift Solutions, would have come in and they can mediate. Let's make something for everybody here. Let's make well, you can't make everybody happy. But at least make enough people happy that they'll shop at this store, they won't go out of business. And so, but unfortunately, the Megan Barry administration came to an end abruptly due to controversy. You can Google it, Megan Barry controversy, whatever. If you've ever seen that movie Whitney Houston called The Bodyguard with what's his name, Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston, yeah, it kind of went down like that. Except anyway, you can go look that up. Let's see. So that's the end of that presentation. So this is me with the churn over it somehow. I think that's at Pearlcom. Okay, are there any questions before we go to break?
Okay.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna stop the recording here. So that's the end of the second segment. Let's see, let's take a 5-minute break, come back at 2:05.